my prayer is that like God would use this to return to women the spirit of tenderness, like the softness of heart, the tenderness, and then also the fierceness to know you have voice and you have purpose and calling, and all of that is not passive, it's fought for. You are listening to the Famous at Home podcast with Dr. Josh and Christi Straub.
Because when it's all said and done, we all want to know that we were famous at home. Welcome back to the Famous at Home podcast. As promised, part 2 from last week, I guess. Tender and fierce. Living tender and fierce, y'all. I have no idea what that means. Actually, I do. You might not know what that means, but Christi knows what it means. We're going to talk to her about it. In the show notes today, you will see 2 big things. MyKidsEQ Coaching Cohort, which you can sign up for. We talked about that last week. But this week, the big thing is the Tender and Fierce 8-week coaching cohort, hosted and led by yours truly, Christi Straub. Right here, she sits with me today. She's going to talk a little bit about it. We are so excited about launching it. We have people registered. Seats are limited, so you might want to make sure you get in. It is 8 weeks. It is content. It is experiential exercises, group exercises. It is Christi loving and serving your hearts in a beautiful way, because I already know how she does it. And so, Christi, welcome to the Famous at Home podcast as my interviewee. I would like to interview you today.
It's great to be with you today, Josh.
Well,
no, but really it is.
I hope so.
I feel like you're my best.
I hope it's always great to be with me.
It is always great to be with
Always?
you. You're my favorite person.
Is it always great to be with me, for real?
I mean, most
For real,
of the
for
time.
real?
Yeah. Especially lately.
Well, thank you for that.
You've been just...
Especially lately. Let's talk about 3 years ago.
Let's talk about...
Was I really great to be with 3 years ago?
Less so. There was less good days then. There was good days. There was some hard days.
Yeah.
I like you better now.
I like me better now.
I know you do.
I like me better now.
I know
It's
you
amazing
do.
what Jesus will do to someone's heart when you trust in them a little bit more each day.
It's weird. It's like he said that somewhere
right.
along the way, but we forgot about it.
Just getting out of religion and back into the heart.
Relationship.
All right. So tell me a little bit about tender and fierce.
let's
Where
talk
did
about
this
that.
phrase come from? Tell me what it means to be tender and fierce, because those are diametrically opposed. They seem to be diametrically opposed.
But are they?
What are they?
Actually, where it came from was the Lord. I have no other description for that. I literally was journaling one morning, and I just heard him say tender and fierce. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's what it is. And then it was sort of like, he was like, no, also that's the name. And I was like, oh, got it. That's cool. I like that. So we've been wrestling around with this. You know, I've been coaching women, I guess, I don't know, the last few years anyway. My background's counseling. So this is different. And I do want to clarify that this isn't counseling. This is coaching. It allows more, I would even just say freedom too. Like we can bring in this true spirit of God. Like I don't have to stick to these. Counseling is wonderful. I loved counseling. I love being in counseling. I love counselors. But there is more freedom in coaching in that I can have a relationship with you.
When you're ministering.
It's more ministry. Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
You're ministering.
It's more, I just realized I am not meant to fit in the box of counseling. This really is more ministry. So, Tender and Fierce was the name. That's about what I got at the beginning. And we've done Leader's Heart for women. Phew, I could go on a whole thing. That is still probably to date one of the most favorite things I've done. I was going to say, no, like literally in life. Like I loved it so much. But we even realized with that, it took on its own spin. It was, were you working with counselors? Were you working as a group sort of counseling? Yeah-ish. But it was more ministry. Like it became ministry. It became a prophetic, a praying over. It became a speaking into, declaring life over it, like literally setting women free. I can't do that. Like no human can do that. God does that. And that's all I wanted. We kind of left that and being like, I only want to be partners with you, God. Like I remember saying that to the Lord actually one morning after Leader's Heart. And I was like, if that's what it's like to partner with you, I want to do it for the rest of my life. Like I will partner with you for the rest of my life. Just don't ever leave me on my own. Just don't ever make me do this work by myself. That would be awful. But with you, like hands down, hands up, I will do it anytime. And so that's really, I think, guess what it became for me. It was like, how do I blend ministry with also like the work of the Father is to set the captives free and to heal the brokenhearted and to declare freedom for the captives. And I know like that is what, it feels really bold to say that. I know, like I've known that's my calling for a long time, but to actually say that publicly feels really weird. It feels very declarative, I guess. But it's so clear to me. And that's, yet it's like super abstract. Like we're not talking about like actually breaking, well, there's a difference between captives and prisoners, first of all, but we're not like talking about like going in and breaking people out of things, but the oppression, the anxiety, the holds over us that we actually almost just kind of get used to. It's not of God. And he's saying like, I want your whole freedom. And this is my story. This is like every woman I've ever known's story, of coming from captivity, where I believe the enemy traps us in insecurities. He grabs our voice and steals it from us. He steals our freedom in like thousands of ways. And the Lord is saying, I came to set the captives free. And every daughter of God has a calling on their life. But if they're stuck in chains like old ones, or if they're acquiring new ones, they aren't free to run the race. Like picture like a horse that is just built to run and is stuck in a stall of fear, shame, insecurity, self-doubt, woundedness. I mean, you name it. It's like the same strategy, but just like different tools used. And I think, in my own world and life, the Lord had to walk me down the long haul of healing and freedom. And it doesn't happen in one fell swoop, and it doesn't happen all at once, but it happens over time and with obedience. And I think what's been super special for me to watch is how full circle so much of this is in my own journey. That like pieces of things from like 20 years ago where I learned, this modality, or I've learned, it's like he's pulling all of this together and it's creating some new mosaic of, I don't know. And that's where people are like, what is it? And I'm like, I don't really know what you call it, because there's no term for it, because I think that's what happens when you build something new.
You're doing ministry.
But you're walking, yeah.
So tell us what
it is.
Tell us what tender and fierce means to you.
Tender and fierce.
Or what's the outcome of this?
Okay, so the word tender, I mean, I would just say that word to you and pause for a moment and like notice what that does to you. Tender. Because some of you will be like, oh, like wanting to melt. Some of you will be like cringing inside of like, ew, like that feels gross, or even feel angry. And I would just be curious. And I would ask you to be curious, to just notice that. There's a reaction to, I think, some of these deeper things that God has planted within what it is to be human and like wholly human. So tenderness is something that we really are born with. We come into the world fragile and vulnerable and wanting to just be loved and love other people and touch them and be close to them. And it's just such a tender spirit that gets really hardened along the way. And we go through a lot of hurts. We go through rejections and social stuff. We go through family stuff and stuff with mom, stuff with dad, stuff with siblings, first jobs, school stuff, coaches. Think of all of the points of impact that have probably poked holes in us, that when a hole is poked, something comes in to want to protect. Like, I'm not going to let that happen again. And what I see with a whole lot of women is what was tender, and what I believe is one of our most, like, the strength of a woman is our tenderness. It is our ability to mother, to love, to give our whole selves, to nurture, to be in relationship requires this softness of heart. Like, I see you, and I'm known by you, and I want to be known by you. I want to live life. I want to feel joy. I want to see things in nature and be touched by them. I want to watch my kids run or play or do something that it doesn't cause fear or anxiety in me, but just utter delight. I think that's what tenderness really is, when we're able to be touched by things. Like the actual life we're living moves us and we feel it. And like, we get to experience the fullness of life with a tender heart. But what happens is, with our wounds, we just become hard. And we become bitter.
Short, passive aggressive.
Oh, please, would you fill in this list? What do we become?
I would. I don't know about we as a collective. I just see what my wife becomes when she's not tender. And so.
What does that look like? Seriously.
Passive aggressive.
Yep.
Sighing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Martyrdom.
Yep.
Victim.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is it's so real. And I think that's so if any of those words resonate, relate, like, oh yeah.
And exhausted. I think exhaustion, busyness really takes out the tenderness.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes almost like a hopelessness, like a despairing spirit, like things are just getting worse or things are just hard or bad. Without the ability to like hold joy and goodness. And so that's the tender word.
Well, and I think the tender word too, if you have a difficult time identifying or wanting to even label emotion or go there because you stay in your to-do list and the busyness of the day, there's a that to do and all that, that's a protective function of being tender and our tenderness.
Yeah. If you're functioning and you're living out of functionality or productivity, that's probably almost opposite to tender. That's actually a great way to say it, because it's not that you're you've even become hard, you've become numb, right? By staying busy enough. And that is, that's society, isn't it? And so tenderness is actually pretty rare. And it'd be interesting, even if you just like pause for a second to think of a woman in your life that you could say like, yeah, she has a tender heart. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you even view that as positive or negative, because that's interesting. And then fierce on the other side.
Yeah. Talk about fierce.
Yeah. So fierce is not actually on the other side, but it sure sounds like it. Fierce is a trait of that I really believe that God has called women to embody within not just our lives, but within our homes, within our relationships. We are the warriors that stand when they talk about like at your watchtower, or when they would stand at the wall and watch. We are the guardians at the gate. And there is a fierceness when they talk about like a mama lion, and they talk about, protecting their, like we kind of like sort of refer to that in culture, you know, mama bear, like, oh, she's going to go mama bear. But there is a ferocity to women and the spirit of women that has gotten not just dulled, but like stamped out. And that's not just because of, I'm not talking like oppression or, you know, women's rights. I'm talking numbness and apathy. Because after years of enduring a really functional, busy life in carrying wounds and living without feeling, you become pretty apathetic. We all, like, you become numb. And therefore, we're not fierce. We're laissez-faire, because it's about the only energy we can muster is to just be like, it's fine, whatever. And it's not fine. And we know that it's not, but we don't have it within us. We don't have any reserves. And so my prayer is that, like, God would use this to return to women the spirit of tenderness, like the softness of heart, the tenderness, and then also the fierceness to know you have voice and you have purpose and calling, and all of that is not passive, it's fought for. And yet when the enemy has walked you down a long enough journey and has poked enough holes, you're so tired that you don't have it within you. You can't just muster up more. And I say that with like so much compassion and so much understanding, and like not an ounce of shame. You don't have the capacity right now. And that's what I see tender and fierce as. That's the point. That's what it's bringing, is it's bringing an environment in which the reserves get filled back up. And this isn't just like Lincoln Arms and like community's great. And I love community. And I do believe in the importance of it, which is why we are doing it as a group. But it actually requires healing. It requires healing in really deep places. And it's like a layer by layer thing. And yet he does it. He does it.
Healing happens in community.
Healing happens when you're known. And so much of this stuff we just hide. And we don't even, like, even our good friends, or we say our best friends, like we don't even share this stuff, because it's almost like you can't put words to it. The despair you feel, or the lostness, or like, where did I go? What happened to me? What's my purpose? So we talk about the surface practical stuff of
taking
life.
kids to practice and
and so struggles with your husband or whatever.
And I think the thing is that, you know, what I hear you saying, well, there's two things. One, I think of the women in our lives who are tender and fierce. I think of the women who we've talked about. We just had friends here the other week for the Super Bowl, and you know, they left, and we were just talking a little bit afterwards, and the word that we used was free. She's free, you know, and when I think of that particular friend, I think of somebody who is truly present with where she is, but she knows her calling, and she sets healthy boundaries around that, and she sets healthy boundaries around her family. But when she's present and when she says yes, her yeses mean yes, and she's all there. And I feel like that for all of us, that's what it is. But to take that even deeper, so I want you to think about someone in your life, a woman in your life you look up to, who you look at and you go, you know, I talked about this last week, but I talk about it as a glimpse, being a glimpse. Yeah. A woman in your life, or even a man. If you're a man listening to this right now, you know, we're talking about the Tender and Fierce Women's group. If you're a man, anybody listening to this, you look to someone and you go, they carry a glimpse of something. Mm-hmm. And my bet would be that they somehow balance this idea of being tender and fierce. And if I'm going to take it to the source, I think it's Jesus coming full of grace and truth. That's it. And there's that.
Where there's
dynamic.
A soft heart, which is the grace part, right? There's a softness of heart. There's an understanding. There is a empathy, a compassion. And then there's also strong boundaries. So I love that. It's not a juxtaposition. I think in order to have a soft heart, you have to have strong boundaries. And so that is part of And you'll know a woman who doesn't have strong boundaries by how jagged she is, because she has not protected herself. And so there's far too many yeses. There's far too much overwhelm and exhaustion. Like those are all pointers to it really comes down to, like, God made us in a body for a reason, and to the body saying, it's been too much for too long, and now I'm done. And so we talk about it like it's called pull is like an e-brake, and that's where overwhelm sets in, where it's just like and apathy and numbness and all those things. And I just want to put this just deep blanket of understanding on it. If that feels like you, like, of course it does. Like, of course it makes sense. You are not abnormal. And I don't mean like everybody struggles. I mean, the way you compensate for what you've been through makes sense. The things you go to, even if there's like, if you go to alcohol, if you go to shopping, if you numb out on social media, if you avoid in relationships, you make sense. It all makes sense. It's your body's way of protecting you. And these are the things, these protective things are the very things that we have to deal with first, because they're trying to protect you from not getting hurt anymore. And Jesus is trying to get through those things to say, I love her too much. I can't let her live with these big things, sometimes they look like huge walls. Sometimes they're real secretive and nobody else knows about them, but and you're not free, and he's coming to set the captives free. And so,
and I just want to say, when you get that freedom, like I've been experiencing and living in that freedom over the last couple of weeks and months. And so we're talking about the ministry component of this, helping women to be free, but take us into some of the other components of what Tender and Fierce looks like practically.
So
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Yeah. So
lessons we're doing mixed in with some experiential.
Yeah. You're making it like super practical. I'm like thinking of it all up in my head, and you're like, It's 8 weeks. Yes, it is 8 weeks.
All those details in the show notes, Tender and Fierce page. Check it out.
Go to the website. But because what I realized is I love being with women and doing this with women one-on-one. And I don't know that you can ever, you can't replicate that. But what is different is community and realizing like you're going over the same things. Like so many times I'm like, I just wish you had heard the last woman I just spoke to. Like, it's the same thing. Like, you both would feel so like, take off all that shame, or like, I feel like I just am so struggling, and I feel like I'm like the only one who's in this. And I'm like, oh, I just wish you could have sat in on that conversation, that you would know that this is so much more universal, but also there's just such beauty in healing when you see someone else do it and realizing like we're talking about the same things over and over again, or I'm teaching on the same things, and I'm repeating the same concepts, and it's like, oh my goodness, like that's so, because some of it is a relearning. It's learning why you're responding the way that you do and taking the shame off it. So you're like, that totally makes sense that I respond like that when my husband does this. And
so go into that a little bit, because this isn't about telling stories, and you're not, so go into what,
and you won't. And yes. So for the most part, to all the introverts out there, I would probably say I'm one of them, especially in a large group.
You would be in this setting.
In a group setting. We will do these on Zoom. You can have your camera off. You do not have to have your camera on. You can if you want. There is absolutely no compulsion to ever say a word. You can just listen and receive the whole time. We'll do 1 week of teaching, and then the next week will be experiential. So it's every other. And the reason is so much of this, so the somatic is the word, and I've heard, I'm not on social media, but I've heard it's going around social media a lot lately. It just means body-based. So it's the just listening to the story that the body is telling, because it remembers things that our brains just don't. And it is, I think, the missing link that I have felt in when God talks about us being whole beings, that's the one piece that I think we've done the like mind stuff. We've obviously done the spiritual stuff, but this is like the missing component, and you just can't take them apart. Like they're just all one. And so
practically speaking, somatic is the missing link. What does this look like in the group?
Yeah. So on the first, when we do a teaching, so much of this is new to most of us, that understanding why we do things and how the body stores trauma, or just really just hard things that have happened to us, stress, and how we respond to it is really important. So the teaching will be the 1 week. The second week will be the experiential, which is the actual process of paying attention to what the body's saying and going into it very gently. This is not therapy, but this is releasing stored stressors, stored places where the body's still carrying tension, protecting from things that have happened. And it doesn't realize the difference between time and space. So it's acting like it's still happening. So you might feel like, oh, like I still have this, like, my shoulders are always tense, or you might just feel chronic tension. It'll look like anxiety. It'll look like even depression, where the body's still holding on to an old pattern. And we have ways of somatically, so body-based, releasing that. But we do all that through the presence of Jesus. We do all of that in like truly inviting in the Spirit of God first, and He guides us through it. And it's just a really beautiful, now it's like, I don't really know another way of doing,
helping.
Yeah. Like
it's
being
fun.
with people.
It's fun for me to watch you do it and see women set free, and just the stories. But you were set free, and you have been set free. And in the last episode, you were giving us an example. You're talking about things just not being in place and that being okay. And you were almost brought to tears, and you wanted to go even further. You were like, I want to go in more. Could you just maybe give us a little bit of that healing for you?
So like perfectionism, or what would look like, like you have a very organized home or something, liking things just so. It's not just part of personality. It's a way you've adapted to stress. And it's, again, you make sense. Like it makes so much sense. But also it doesn't have to be that way. And we can, that's why I was talking about it last week, is just like this understanding for me of letting go of some of those things. Like I can't, and this is what bothers me, I think, about even just self-help culture, and just like the way we say like just let it go. Like why just let it go? Like let the mess go, or you can't just let go. Your entire body is holding on to something because it believes it's protecting you. So to then go shame someone and tell them, and we do this in the church, where you tell them your depression, your anxiety, it's just because you haven't been redeemed by Jesus. Like His redemptive work hasn't finished in your life. Yes, there's elements of truth to that. There's also elements to your sweet body is doing everything it can to protect you, and you haven't told it anything different. So it's going to keep doing the same thing that worked the last time to keep you safe, to protect you from when you are being threatened in any way, your sense of belonging, your sense of dignity. If your safety is threatened, it's going to find something that worked, and it'll stick with it until we tell it a different message and say, we're okay now. You can let go. And so that's what I was like, for me to be able to let go and like actually see the cupboards like messy and be okay. Yeah. Like I'm not just faking that and like strong arming, like, yes, it's fine. And as I'm like twitching, that is like, it tells you, like, that's where I'm talking about, like on the bodily level, we're actually healing things. We're not actually overriding them anymore and just plowing through.
Yeah. So we'll put this in the show notes, Tender and Fierce group. It starts the first week of April. I believe it's April 4th, if I'm not mistaken. We'll put it in the show notes. We would love to have you sign up. If you have any questions, go to famousathome.com/contact. You can just get us there. Send an email. Let us know if you have any questions. We would love to have, I know Christi would love to have you join us. There are limited spaces available, so make sure you get in now. And
I am so excited.
this is Tender and Fierce. And there's a lot of other cool things coming up with Famous at Home that we're pretty stoked about. This is just the beginning of some of that. And so we can't wait to have you join us. Until next week, keep in mind, friends, that the greatest red carpet you will walk is through your front door.
Keep being famous at home. We love you.